She was lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling while her husband snored beside her, and she could not remember the last time he had looked at her with anything resembling interest. Claire Brennan was 35 years old, had been married for 12 years, and somewhere along the way had become invisible in her own home. The realization did not come as a dramatic revelation, but as a slow, creeping acknowledgement that had been building for years, settling into her bones like winter cold that never quite left. The bedroom was dark, except for the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. David shifted in his sleep, one arm flung across his pillow, completely unaware that his wife was lying 18 inches away, feeling like a stranger in her own marriage. She turned her head slightly to look at him. His face was relaxed in sleep, mouth slightly open, features softened by unconsciousness. He looked younger when he slept, more like the man she had married at 23. That version of David had laughed easily, had asked her opinions about everything, had made her feel like the most important person in every room. This version, the one snoring beside her now, had not asked her opinion about anything meaningful in at least 3 years. Claire carefully slid out of bed, her feet finding the cool hardwood floor in the darkness. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and padded quietly down the hallway, past the guest room they never used, past the home office that was exclusively his territory, and into the kitchen. The house was a beautiful 3-bedroom in the Bay Area, purchased 5 years ago when David's career in tech management had really taken off. It had granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and a view of the hills from the living room window. It was the kind of house that looked perfect in photos, the kind that made their friends comment enviously about how well they were doing. What those friends did not see was how empty it felt, how the beautiful rooms echoed with silence and unspoken resentments. She filled a glass with water and leaned against the counter, phone in hand. The blue light illuminated her face as she scrolled mindlessly through social media, not really seeing any of it. Then her thumb paused over an advertisement that had appeared in her feed. Learn German. Start your journey. Today, the ad showed a cheerful woman wearing headphones, presumably listening to a language lesson, smiling like she had discovered some wonderful secret. Claire stared at the ad longer than she intended. German. She had not thought about learning German in years. 14 years, to be precise. She had been 21, a junior in college, filling out applications for a study abroad program in Berlin. She could still remember the excitement, the way her heart had raced as she researched neighborhoods, imagined herself walking along the Spree River, practicing her conversational German in cafes. She had started taking introductory classes, had bought a grammar workbook, had plastered her dorm room wall with sticky notes containing German vocabulary words. She had been so ready, so eager to step into that experience. Then she had met David at a friend's party. He had been 24, already working at a promising startup, confident and charming and interested in her in a way that felt intoxicating. They had started dating. He had said he loved how ambitious she was, how she knew what she wanted. But when she mentioned the study abroad program, he had gotten quiet. They had only been dating for 2 months, he had said, and he did not want to do long distance. He had asked her to stay, told her they could travel to Germany together someday, that it would be better to go when she was not stressed about classes and assignments. And she, 21 and in love and wanting to believe that compromise was what mature relationships required, had withdrawn her application. They never did travel to Germany together. There was always a reason. His work schedule, her work schedule, saving for the house, saving for the future. The dream had gotten filed away in some mental drawer labeled Things I Gave Up, and she had told herself it was fine, that everyone makes sacrifices in relationships, that she had gained something better. Standing in her dark kitchen at 3 in the morning, Claire was not sure she believed that anymore. She clicked on the ad. It took her to a language learning app with bright, encouraging graphics and promises of fluency in months, not years. The first lesson was free. She glanced back toward the hallway, listening for any sound of David waking, then plugged in her earbuds and tapped the screen. A cheerful voice began explaining basic German pronunciation. Claire listened, repeating the words in a whisper. Guten Morgen. Wie geht es Ihnen? Her accent was terrible, rusty from disuse, but something in her chest loosened slightly as she formed the unfamiliar sounds. She completed the first lesson, then the second. Then she subscribed to the premium version, setting up a payment that would come out of her personal checking account, the one she still kept separate from their joint finances. She did not examine too closely why she wanted to keep this secret. Maybe because she knew David would dismiss it, would make some comment about her starting another hobby she would abandon, would find a way to make her feel foolish for trying. Maybe because this felt like something that belonged only to her, a small rebellion against the way she had learned to make herself smaller and quieter over the years. That night turned into the next night, and the next. Claire found herself waking at odd hours, slipping out of bed to practice German in the kitchen or the bathroom with the door closed. She listened to podcasts during her commute to work. She started taking online lessons with a tutor in Munich twice a week, scheduled during her lunch breaks. She told the receptionist at her office that she had doctor's appointments, which was not technically a lie, because she was treating something, even if that something was the slow death of the person she used to be. David noticed nothing. He came home from work, ate the dinners she prepared, talked about his day and the politics at his company and the upcoming promotion he was angling for, and never once asked what she had done with her time. This should have hurt more than it did, but Claire had grown a thick skin over the years. She had learned not to expect interest or curiosity from him. She had learned to be content with the fragments of attention he offered. The German learning became an obsession, but a healthy one, the kind that made her feel alive in a way she had almost forgotten. She was good at it. Languages had always come naturally to her, and German's logical structure appealed to the part of her brain that loved solving puzzles. Within 3 months, she could hold basic conversations. Within 5 months, she was reading German news articles and understanding the majority of the content. By month 6, she had logged over 700 hours of study and practice, and her tutor in Munich told her that her comprehension and speaking ability were at an advanced conversational level. 700 hours. She had spent 700 hours learning a language while her husband slept, worked, and lived his life completely unaware that his wife was becoming someone new in the spaces between his attention. The irony was not lost on her. She had become invisible to him, and in that invisibility, she had found a strange kind of freedom. It was a Tuesday evening in early October, when David came home with news that made Claire's heart skip a beat for reasons he would never understand. He walked through the door at 7:30, loosening his tie and dropping his briefcase by the hall table with his usual distracted air. Claire was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, when he came in and actually smiled at her, which was rare enough that she paused with the knife in midair. "Good news," he said, opening the refrigerator and grabbing a beer. "Stefan is coming to the States next week." Stefan Müller. Claire knew the name well. Though she had never met the man, he was David's German business partner, or more accurately, a senior director at a technology company in Frankfurt that had been collaborating with David's company on various projects for the past 6 years. David talked about Stefan frequently, always with a tone of respect and camaraderie that he rarely used when speaking about anyone else. They had worked together on 3 major product launches, had attended conferences together, had apparently bonded over their shared love of efficiency and strategic planning. From everything David said, Stefan was more than a colleague. He was a friend. "That is nice," Claire said carefully, resuming her chopping. "Is he coming for a conference?" "Better. He is coming to finalize the partnership deal we have been working on for the past year. If this goes through, Claire, this is it. This is the vice presidency. They are creating a new position, specifically to oversee the international partnerships, and I am at the top of the list." David took a long drink of his beer, his eyes bright with excitement. "We are having dinner next Friday, somewhere nice in the city. You need to come." Claire set down the knife and turned to face him fully. "You want me to come to a business dinner?" "Stefan expects it. He is old-fashioned about these things. Wants to meet the spouse, see that I am stable and settled." David waved his hand dismissively. "You just need to show up, look nice, smile. The usual. The usual." As if she were a prop, a decorative element to complete the picture of his successful life. Claire felt the familiar tightness in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. "Where is the dinner?" "That French place on Montgomery Street. I will make a reservation for 7. He paused, and something in his expression shifted slightly, became almost apologetic, though not quite. "Fair warning, Stefan's English is not great. He understands more than he speaks, but he is more comfortable in German. So the conversation will probably be mostly in German once we get past the pleasantries. You will probably be bored, but it should not last more than a couple hours." Claire's heart was pounding so hard she was certain David must be able to hear it. She turned back to the cutting board, using the motion of scraping chopped peppers into a bowl to hide the tremor in her hands. "That is fine," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "I can entertain myself." "Great. I will send you the details." David finished his beer and left the kitchen, already pulling out his phone to respond to work emails. Claire stood very still, the knife forgotten in her hand, her mind racing. David had no idea she spoke German, no idea she had spent the last 6 months studying with an intensity that bordered on obsession, no idea that she could understand every word that might be spoken at that dinner. He thought she would sit there, smile politely, and be decoratively present while he conducted his business in a language she could not comprehend. He thought she would be invisible. She set down the knife and gripped the edge of the counter, a strange mixture of emotions flooding through her. Fear, anticipation, something that felt almost like power, because she suddenly understood that she had a choice. She could reveal her German skills, could participate in the conversation, could surprise both David and his friend. Or she could stay silent, could pretend to understand nothing, could listen to everything they said while they believed she was oblivious. Claire thought about the past 12 years, about all the times David had made her feel small, had dismissed her opinions, had treated her like an accessory to his life rather than a partner. She thought about the way he had just now told her to show up and look nice, as if that were her only function. And she made her decision. She would go to that dinner. She would smile politely. She would pretend to understand nothing. And she would listen to every single word. The week passed in a strange haze of normalcy and anticipation. Claire went through her usual routines, working at her marketing job for a small consulting firm, coming home to cook dinner, watching television with David while he scrolled through his phone, barely paying attention to either the show or her. But underneath the surface, her mind was constantly working, playing through scenarios, wondering what she might hear, preparing herself for possibilities she did not want to fully articulate. She spent extra time with her German tutor that week, explaining that she had an important business function coming up and wanted to make sure her comprehension was sharp. The tutor, a patient woman named Petra, who taught from her apartment in Munich via video call, seemed pleased by Claire's dedication and put her through intensive listening exercises, playing recordings of rapid conversational German and asking Claire to summarize the content. Claire scored nearly perfectly on all of them. "Your comprehension is excellent," Petra said in German during their Thursday session. "You should be confident in any conversation at this level. You have worked very hard." "Thank you," Claire responded in German, the words flowing naturally now. "I appreciate your patience with me." After the session ended, Claire sat in her parked car outside her office building where she had taken the call during lunch, and allowed herself a moment of pride. 700 hours. 6 months of secret study. She had done this entirely on her own, with no encouragement from her husband, no support system beyond a tutor who lived 5,000 miles away. She had rebuilt a piece of herself that she thought was lost forever. Friday arrived. Claire took extra care getting ready, choosing a navy blue dress that was elegant but not attention-seeking. Classic pearl earrings, subtle makeup. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. On the surface, she looked like the dutiful wife preparing for a business dinner, but underneath, she felt like a spy preparing for a mission. The thought made her smile slightly, which felt strange because she could not remember the last time she had smiled at her own reflection. David came home at 6 to change into a fresh suit. He gave her a quick once-over and nodded. "You look nice. Ready?" "Ready," Claire said. They drove into the city in David's car, the silence between them filled with a jazz station playing softly on the radio. David tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, mentally reviewing talking points for the dinner. Completely absorbed in his own thoughts, Claire watched the city lights blur past her window and felt oddly calm. Whatever was about to happen, she had chosen it. For once, she was not just reacting to David's plans or fitting herself into his narrative. She was stepping into this dinner with her own agenda, her own power, her own secrets. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place David loved, the sort of establishment that screamed expensive without being ostentatious, where the waitstaff moved with practiced elegance, and the lighting was designed to make everyone look their best. They arrived 5 minutes early. David gave his name to the hostess, who checked her list and informed them that the third member of their party had not yet arrived. They were shown to a quiet table near the back, round with white linens and fresh flowers in the center. David ordered a scotch. Claire ordered white wine. They sat in silence, David checking his phone, Claire observing the other diners. An older couple celebrating an anniversary. A group of businessmen laughing too loudly over their appetizers. A young woman dining alone, reading a book between courses. "There he is," David said suddenly, standing and raising his hand. Claire looked toward the entrance and saw a tall man in his early 40s walking toward them. Stefan Mueller had salt and pepper hair, an athletic build, and the kind of face that suggested he smiled often, but was not smiling broadly now, just wearing a professional expression of pleasant greeting. He shook David's hand warmly, and they clapped each other on the shoulders in that way men do when they are genuinely glad to see each other. Then Stefan turned to Claire, and she stood to greet him. "You must be Claire," he said, in accented but clear English. "It is very nice to finally meet you. David speaks of you often." "It is nice to meet you too," Claire said, shaking his hand and smiling politely. "David has told me a lot about your work together." They all sat. The waiter appeared to take Stefan's drink order, then departed with promises to return with menus. The conversation began in English, polite and surface level. Stefan asked about Claire's work, and she gave the brief, dismissive answer she had learned to give over the years, describing her marketing position as if it were a minor hobby rather than the job she had held for 8 years and was actually quite good at. Stefan nodded politely. Then the conversation shifted naturally to business matters, to the partnership deal, to timelines and logistics. And then, just as naturally, the language shifted too. Stefan said something in German, a comment about the complexity of international contracts, and David responded in German without missing a beat. They both glanced at Claire with brief apologetic expressions, then continued. It was clear they had made the unspoken decision that it was simply easier to talk in their shared language, and Claire would not mind, or perhaps would not even notice the shift. Claire picked up her wine glass and took a small sip, her face arranged in an expression of pleasant disinterest, and began to listen to every word. The conversation flowed in German, easy and comfortable between the two men, punctuated by occasional laughter and the kind of shorthand that develops between people who have worked together for years. Claire sat quietly, her posture relaxed, her expression mildly pleasant but slightly distant, as if her mind were elsewhere. She reached for a piece of bread from the basket the waiter had brought, buttered it slowly, took small bites. To anyone observing, she looked like a woman patiently enduring a business dinner she could not fully participate in. Polite, but disconnected. Inside, her heart was racing. Every word they spoke registered with perfect clarity. Her 6 months of intensive study had prepared her well. Stefan's German was educated and formal, precisely the kind she had practiced with Petra. David's German was more casual, peppered with English business terms, but completely comprehensible. She understood everything. The appetizers arrived. Stefan had ordered the scallops, David the French onion soup, Claire a simple salad. They ate while continuing their discussion about market projections, regulatory challenges in the European Union, timeline expectations for the partnership rollout. It was all perfectly professional, exactly the kind of conversation Claire had expected. She felt herself relaxing slightly. Maybe this dinner would be unremarkable after all. Maybe her secret knowledge of German would turn out to be unnecessary, just an insurance policy never claimed. Then Stefan asked, in German, "So how is Claire's work going? She seems very nice." David swallowed a spoonful of soup before responding, also in German. "Oh, it is just a small administrative thing. Marketing coordinator at some little consulting firm. Nothing serious, really. Just something to keep her busy, you know? Give her something to do with her time." Claire's hand tightened around her fork. She kept her eyes on her salad, spearing a piece of lettuce with careful precision. Her face remained neutral. Inside, something cold settled in her stomach. Stefan made a non-committal sound. "She works full-time?" "Yeah, but it is not like real work," David said, reaching for his wine. "Not like what we do. She handles social media posts, email newsletters, that kind of thing. Nothing that requires real strategic thinking. I handle all the actual important stuff at home. The finances, investments, big decisions. She is not really interested in that kind of thing anyway." The waiter appeared to clear their appetizer plates and present the entree menus. Claire smiled at him, thanked him in English, and turned her attention to the menu as if she were deeply invested in choosing between the salmon and the chicken. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. But her mind was screaming. Just something to keep her busy. Not real work. She is not really interested. She had heard David make dismissive comments about her job before, usually when they were at parties and someone asked what she did. He always framed it as if her career were a charming little hobby, something she dabbled in to pass the time while he did the serious work of providing for them. But hearing him say it in German to his close friend, with that casual certainty, that easy dismissiveness, felt different. It felt like she was hearing the truth of what he really thought, the version he shared when he believed she could not understand. Stefan was saying something about work-life balance, mentioning his own wife who worked as a doctor in Frankfurt. David made an appreciative comment about how impressive that was, then added, "Claire is good at the domestic stuff, though. She keeps the house nice, cooks well. That is important, too. The domestic stuff. As if she were a housekeeper he occasionally slept with." Claire took a sip of water, let the ice-cold liquid ground her. She had made a choice to stay silent, to listen. She needed to maintain that choice. Getting angry now, showing any reaction, would reveal everything. She breathed slowly through her nose and waited for the conversation to move on. It did, returning to business for several minutes. They ordered their entrees. David chose the steak, Stefan the duck, Claire the salmon. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation around them, the gentle clink of silverware on china, the murmur of other people's lives unfolding in their own private dramas. Claire cut her salmon into precise pieces and tried to appear pleasantly bored. Then Stefan said something that made her freeze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "You mentioned last time that things at home were comfortable. Still the same?" Last time. They had discussed her before. Not just tonight, but previously. How many times had she been a topic of conversation in these German exchanges she could not understand? How many dinners or phone calls or video conferences had included David casually discussing his wife as if she were a household appliance whose performance he was evaluating? "Yeah, comfortable is a good word for it," David said, cutting into his steak. "Easy, predictable. She does not really challenge me, you know? Which is fine. I get enough challenge at work. Nice to come home to someone who just goes with the flow." Stefan nodded slowly, but Claire noticed he looked slightly uncomfortable. He took a drink of his wine, then said, "That works for you, then." "It does," David confirmed. "We have a good system. I handle the business side of life. She handles the home side. Everyone knows their role. Their role." Claire carefully set down her fork, worried that if she kept holding it, she might grip it hard enough to bend it. She folded her hands in her lap beneath the table, pressing her nails into her palms. The small pain helped her focus, kept her expression calm. The conversation drifted to European vacation destinations. Stefan mentioned taking his family to Italy the previous summer. David said he and Claire usually just did weekend trips up the coast. Nothing too elaborate. "Claire is not really a planner," he explained in German. "She is more go with the flow. So I usually just pick places, and she is happy with whatever." This was not true. Claire loved planning. She had planned their first 3 anniversary trips down to restaurant reservations and hiking trail maps. David had complained each time that she was being too controlling, too rigid with the schedule, so she had stopped planning. She had learned to just agree when he announced where they were going, to smile and say, "That sounded nice." And now, apparently, this made her someone who was not a planner, someone without preferences or opinions. The entrees were nearly finished when the conversation took a turn that made Claire's blood run cold. Stefan mentioned something about the stress of balancing work demands with personal life, and David laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "I have my outlets," David said in German, and something in his tone made Claire's attention sharpen like a blade. "You know how it is. Sometimes you need something that is just for you, separate from everything else." Stefan made a vague agreeing sound, but he had gone very still. His fork paused over his plate. David continued, apparently taking Stefan's silence as encouragement. "There is this woman in our finance department, Vanessa. She started about 8 months ago. We have been seeing each other. The restaurant did not stop. The other diners did not freeze. The waiter did not dramatically drop a tray of glasses. The world continued exactly as it had been, utterly indifferent to the fact that Claire's world had just collapsed inward. She reached for her water glass because it was there, and her hands needed something to do. She took a sip. The water tasted like nothing. Everything tasted like nothing. "David," Stefan said quietly, his voice carrying a note of warning. "It is fine," David said, waving his hand dismissively. "Claire has no idea. And honestly, it has been good for me. Vanessa gets it, you know? Gets the ambition, the drive, the work. She understands when I have to stay late or travel. She wants to talk about market strategies and growth projections. It is refreshing after coming home to someone who wants to tell me about her day at the office or what we should do this weekend." Claire set down her water glass with great care. She looked at the small flower arrangement in the center of the table, a careful composition of white roses and greenery. She counted the roses. 7. She noted that one had begun to wilt slightly at the edges. She observed these details with crystalline clarity, while her husband casually discussed his affair in a language he believed she could not understand. Stefan was definitely uncomfortable now. He shifted in his seat, glanced at Claire with what looked like guilt or pity, then looked back at David. "I am not sure this is the right conversation to have here," he said carefully in German. "She does not understand us," David said, glancing at Claire with a smile before switching briefly to English. "You doing okay? I know this is boring for you." Claire returned his smile with one she pulled from some deep reserve of performance she did not know she possessed. "I am fine," she said. "The salmon is excellent." "Great," David said, then immediately switched back to German and continued talking to Stefan. "See? She is fine. She is probably thinking about redecorating the living room or something. That is what she usually thinks about." Stefan did not look convinced, but he said nothing more to redirect the conversation. The silence from him seemed to give David permission to continue. "Vanessa and I have actually started talking about the future," David said, cutting the last piece of his steak. "Nothing concrete yet, but you know, exploring possibilities. She is ambitious, wants to move up in the company. We could be a real power couple, both of us climbing together. It is exciting in a way things have not been exciting in a long time." Claire's salmon sat half-eaten on her plate. She could not take another bite, could not force food past the tightness in her throat. But she picked up her fork anyway, pushed the fish around her plate, maintained the appearance of someone mildly disengaged, but content. The waiter returned to ask if they wanted dessert. David ordered the chocolate mousse. Stefan declined. Claire asked for coffee. The waiter departed. The conversation continued. "So what happens with Claire?" Stefan asked, his voice quiet. David shrugged, and the casual nature of the gesture made something in Claire's chest crack. "I do not know yet. I am not making any moves until the vice presidency is secured. Need to keep everything stable for that. But after, who knows? Maybe things change. Maybe they do not. I am keeping my options open." "Seat, you have thought about divorce then," Stefan said. It was not quite a question. "I have thought about a lot of things," David admitted. "The tricky part is the finances. We have everything pretty tangled up. Joint accounts, the house, retirement funds. It would get messy. So I have been moving some things around, being strategic about it, setting up some accounts separately, shifting assets, just in case." Claire's hands had gone numb. She set down her fork and folded them in her lap again, pressing them together to stop them from shaking. "What kind of accounts?" Stefan asked, and now he sounded genuinely concerned. "Nothing crazy," David said. "Just some offshore holdings. A few investments moved to accounts in Switzerland. Smart planning, really. If my career trajectory changes or other life changes happen, I need flexibility. Cannot have everything locked up in joint accounts where she has to sign off on everything." Offshore accounts. Switzerland. He was not just having an affair. He was actively preparing to leave her with nothing. Planning it, strategizing it, treating their marriage like a business deal he was preparing to exit while maximizing his own returns. Claire felt dizzy, like the room had tilted slightly. She focused on breathing, on maintaining her neutral expression, on not letting anything show. The dessert and coffee arrived. David ate his mousse with evident enjoyment, making appreciative sounds. Stefan picked at the spoon of mousse David had convinced him to try. Claire wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, letting the heat burn her palms slightly, using the discomfort to stay grounded in the moment. "You are playing a dangerous game," Stefan said quietly in German. "I am being smart," David corrected. "Strategic, looking ahead. That is what successful people do, right? They plan for multiple scenarios." Stefan said nothing to that. He looked at Claire again, and this time she met his eyes. For just a second, their gazes held. She saw discomfort there, maybe sympathy, maybe shame at being party to this conversation. Then he looked away, and Claire returned her attention to her coffee. The dinner wound down. David paid the bill, insisted despite Stefan's offer to split it. They walked out of the restaurant together into the cool October evening. Stefan shook David's hand, then turned to Claire and took her hand gently. "It was very nice to meet you," he said in English, and there was something in his voice, a weight to the words, that suggested he meant more than simple politeness. "Likewise," Claire said, smiling with lips that felt frozen. They parted ways, Stefan walking toward his hotel, David and Claire returning to their car. David was in high spirits, talking about how well the dinner had gone, how Stefan seemed very positive about the partnership, how everything was aligning perfectly. Claire made small, agreeing sounds, her voice operating on autopilot while her mind reeled. The drive home passed in a blur. David talked. Claire nodded. The city lights gave way to suburban streets, then their neighborhood, then their driveway. They walked into their beautiful house with its granite counters and stainless steel appliances and echoing empty rooms. "I am going to get ready for bed," David said, already loosening his tie as he headed for the stairs. "That went really well. Really, really well." "I am glad," Claire said. "I think I will stay down here for a bit. Not quite ready to sleep yet." "Suit yourself," David said, and disappeared up the stairs. Claire stood in the kitchen, still wearing her navy blue dress and pearl earrings. She listened to the sounds of David moving around upstairs, the water running in the bathroom, the creak of the bed as he got in. She waited until she heard his breathing settle into the rhythm of sleep, which did not take long. He had drunk 3 glasses of wine and a scotch, had eaten a large meal, and had the satisfied exhaustion of someone who believed the evening had been a success. Then, and only then, did Claire move. She walked to the downstairs bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the shower. She sat down on the closed toilet lid and let the sound of the water cover the sounds she could no longer hold back. The first sob came out strangled, painful, like something being torn from her chest. Then another, then more, until she was crying so hard she could barely breathe, her whole body shaking with the force of it. 12 years. 12 years of making herself smaller, of accepting his dismissiveness, of telling herself that all marriages had rough patches, and this was just what mature love looked like. 12 years of believing that if she just tried harder, compromised more, complained less, things would get better. And all along, he had seen her as nothing more than domestic help, someone who was not capable of real work, real thought, real partnership, someone so beneath his notice that he could plan his exit strategy, hide money in foreign accounts, carry on an affair with a co-worker, and discuss it all openly because she was too stupid, too unaware, too unimportant to be a threat. She pressed a towel to her face to muffle the sounds, crying until her ribs ached, until her eyes were swollen, until she felt wrung out and hollow. The shower ran, wasting water, covering her breakdown. When the crying finally subsided into shaky breaths, she stood up and looked at herself in the mirror. Her mascara had run in dark streaks down her face. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked destroyed. She washed her face carefully, cold water shocking her skin. She patted it dry and stared at her reflection. This was the moment, she realized. This was the fulcrum point. She could go upstairs, wake David, confront him with everything she had heard. She could scream and rage and demand explanations, or she could do something else, something calculated, something strategic. David thought she was not capable of real strategic thinking. He was wrong. Claire turned off the shower, straightened her dress, and went to the kitchen. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she had not looked at in years. Rachel Morrison. They had been roommates in college, had stayed friends for a few years after graduation, then drifted apart the way people do when life takes them in different directions. But Claire had kept up with Rachel on social media, had seen her posts about graduating from law school, passing the bar, joining a firm that specialized in family law. It was 11:30 at night, too late to call. But Claire opened a text message anyway. "Hi, Rachel. This is Claire Brennan. I know it has been a long time, but I need to ask you something. Do you still practice family law? I need a divorce attorney. Can we talk soon?" She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she turned off the kitchen lights and went upstairs. David was sprawled across his side of the bed, snoring softly, completely at peace. Claire changed into her pajamas, removed her jewelry, and slid under the covers. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling just as she had that night 6 months ago, when she had first downloaded the language app. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up carefully. A message from Rachel. "Claire, of course I remember you. Yes, I practice family law. I am so sorry you are going through this. Let's talk tomorrow. Call me any time after 9. Here if you need me." Claire set the phone down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would call Rachel. Tomorrow, she would start planning. Tonight, she would lie next to her husband and feel absolutely nothing for him except a cold, clear determination. He had been strategizing his exit, moving pieces around the board while thinking she was too oblivious to notice. He had no idea that she had been listening. He had no idea what was coming. She had learned German in 6 months. 700 hours of study, while he slept beside her, completely unaware. She had done that. She was capable of that kind of dedication, that kind of transformation. And if she could do that, she could do this. Claire fell asleep thinking about offshore accounts and Swiss banks, and the careful documentation she would need to gather. She fell asleep planning her own strategy, her own exit, her own future. And for the first time in 12 years, she fell asleep feeling something that resembled hope. Claire woke before her alarm, which was not unusual. What was unusual was the clarity she felt, as if the tears of the previous night had washed away years of fog. She turned her head to look at David, still asleep, mouth slightly open, one arm flung across the pillow. She felt nothing. No affection, no anger, not even contempt. Just a cool, analytical assessment of a problem that needed to be solved. She got up quietly, showered, dressed in her usual work clothes. Downstairs, she made coffee and toast, going through the familiar morning routine while her mind worked through logistics. David came down at 7:15, already checking his phone, distracted by emails. He poured himself coffee, grabbed a protein bar from the pantry. "Good dinner last night," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Yes," Claire said. "It seemed to go well. Stefan was impressed. This partnership is definitely happening." He finally glanced at her. "Thanks for coming. I know it was boring for you." "Not at all," Claire said, and meant it in ways he could not begin to understand. He left for work at 7:30. Claire waited until his car pulled out of the driveway, then immediately pulled out her phone and called Rachel. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Warmer and more mature than Claire remembered, but still recognizably Rachel. "Claire, hi. I was hoping you would call this morning." "Thank you for responding so quickly," Claire said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I know this is probably not the usual way people reach out for legal help." "Are you safe?" Rachel asked immediately. "That is always my first question." "Physically, yes. He has never been violent. But I need to leave this marriage, and I need to do it carefully. There are complications. Can you come to my office? Or would you prefer to talk somewhere else? I can meet you anywhere you feel comfortable." They agreed to meet at a coffee shop near Rachel's office during Claire's lunch break. Claire drove to work in a daze of purpose, barely registering the familiar route. She worked through her morning tasks on autopilot, responding to emails about social media campaigns and newsletter schedules, the kind of work David considered not real work, not serious. By 11:45, she was pulling into the parking lot of a small coffee shop in a neighborhood she rarely visited. Rachel was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She stood when Claire approached, and they hugged awkwardly, trying to bridge the gap of years with a single gesture. Rachel looked successful, professional in a charcoal suit, her dark hair cut in a sharp bob. She looked like someone who had become exactly who she planned to be. "You look good," Rachel said as they sat down. "I mean, you look tired, but good." "I feel tired," Claire admitted. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup Rachel had ordered for her. "I do not even know where to start." "Start anywhere. I will ask questions to fill in the gaps." So Claire started. She started with the language learning, with the 6 months of secret study, with the decision to stay silent at the dinner. Then she told Rachel everything she had heard. The dismissive comments about her work, the affair with Vanessa from the finance department, the offshore accounts, the strategic asset shifting, the preparation for a divorce where David intended to leave her with as little as possible. She spoke in a low, controlled voice, recounting facts like she was reporting on someone else's life. Rachel listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a legal pad. When Claire finished, Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "How fluent is your German? Truly fluent or conversational?" "Truly fluent. I have been working with a tutor in Munich for 5 months. I can understand complex conversations, read legal and business documents. I tested at an advanced level. That is important. If this goes to court, if he tries to claim you misunderstood what you heard, you need to be able to prove comprehension." Rachel tapped her pen against her notepad. "Claire, what you are describing is serious. Moving assets to offshore accounts while planning a divorce is financial fraud. Hiding marital assets from a spouse is illegal. If we can prove he did this with the intention of depriving you of your fair share in a divorce, we have a strong case." "I need to gather evidence," Claire said. "I need to document everything." "Yes, but carefully. We need to do this right." Rachel leaned forward. "First, do not change your behavior at all. Act completely normal. He cannot suspect anything. Second, we need to document the offshore accounts. Do you have access to his computer? His files? We have a home office. He leaves his laptop there sometimes. I know his password." Claire said this without guilt. She had known his password for years. He had given it to her once when he needed her to email a document while he was traveling, and he had never changed it. "I can take photos of bank statements, investment documents, anything I find. Photographs are good. Time-stamped, hard to dispute. Also check emails, especially correspondence with financial institutions. Look for anything mentioning Switzerland, offshore accounts, transfers of funds." Rachel made more notes. "How are your finances currently structured?" "We have joint checking and savings accounts. The house is in both our names. Retirement accounts are separate but accumulated during the marriage. He handles most of the actual finances. I have access to the accounts, but he makes the investment decisions." Claire heard the bitterness in her own voice. "He always said he was better with money, that I should not worry about it." "Classic financial control," Rachel said grimly. "Okay, we need to freeze the joint accounts before you file for divorce. Otherwise, he can drain them the minute he gets served with papers. We will file a motion for temporary restraining orders on all marital assets. But first, we need documentation. How long do you think it will take you to gather what we need?" "I can start tonight. He works late most Thursdays. I can go through his files then." "Do it. But Claire, be smart. If he catches you, if he suspects anything, he will move faster. He will hide everything better. We get one chance at this." Claire nodded. "I understand." They talked for another 30 minutes, Rachel explaining the divorce process, the likely timeline, what Claire could expect in terms of asset division and spousal support. Then Rachel said something that made Claire pause. "There is another option. If the offshore accounts involve fraud, if he has been falsifying expense reports or moving company money, that could be a criminal matter. We could report it to his company, to authorities. It would destroy his career, possibly result in criminal charges. Some of my clients want that. They want revenge. Is that what you want?" Claire thought about it. She thought about David casually discussing his affair, his plans to leave her with nothing, his complete certainty that she was too stupid and unaware to be a threat. Part of her wanted to burn his world down. Part of her wanted to expose everything, to humiliate him as thoroughly as he had humiliated her. But another part, the part that was thinking clearly, knew that revenge was a trap. Revenge would consume her, would make her bitter, would define her by what he had done rather than by what she would become. and revenge would drag everything out, would make the divorce longer and messier and more painful. "I want what I am entitled to," Claire said finally. "I want my fair share of everything we built together, even if I am the only one who actually considered us a team. I want spousal support while I rebuild my life, and then I want to be done with him. I want him out of my life completely. If he faces consequences for fraud, that should come from his own actions, not from me reporting him. Does that make sense?" Rachel smiled, and there was respect in it. "That makes perfect sense. That is the smartest approach, actually. We focus on the divorce, on protecting your interests. If his fraud catches up with him, that is his problem, not yours." She closed her notepad. "I am going to start drafting documents. Gather everything you can over the next few weeks. Photograph everything. Then we will decide when to file." They finished their coffee. Claire drove back to work, her mind already planning her evening. She worked through the afternoon in a state of focused calm, answering emails, reviewing marketing analytics, attending a meeting about an upcoming client campaign. Her boss complimented her on a social media strategy she had developed. Claire thanked her, accepted the praise, and thought about David saying her work was just something to keep her busy, not real work. She left the office at 5:30 and stopped at the grocery store. She bought ingredients for David's favorite meal, chicken parmesan with pasta. She bought a good bottle of red wine. She was going to make everything seem perfectly, utterly normal. David came home at 7, later than usual. Claire had dinner ready, the table set, soft music playing from the speaker in the living room. He looked surprised. "What is all this?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "Nothing special. Just thought it would be nice to have a real dinner together." Claire handed him a glass of wine. "How was your day?" They ate dinner. Claire asked questions about his work, listened to his answers, made appropriate responses. She was pleasant, attentive, the version of herself he seemed to prefer, the one who did not challenge or question. He relaxed, talked about the progress on the partnership deal, mentioned that Stefan had emailed to say how much he enjoyed meeting her. Claire smiled and said, "That was nice." After dinner, David settled on the couch to watch a documentary about World War II. Claire cleaned the kitchen, loaded the dishwasher, and then said she was going to take a bath and read for a bit. David barely looked up from the television. Claire went upstairs, ran water in the bathtub to create noise, but instead of getting in, she went to the home office. David's laptop sat on the desk, closed, but not locked away. She opened it, entered his password. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her mind was clear. She started with his email. It took her 20 minutes to find the relevant correspondence, but once she started looking, the evidence was overwhelming. Emails from a Swiss bank confirming the opening of a private account, correspondence with a financial advisor about moving assets offshore for tax purposes and asset protection, transfers of money, 30,000 here, 25,000 there, all carefully timed and documented. Claire pulled out her phone and began photographing everything. She made sure the dates were visible, the account numbers clear, the amounts legible. She found spreadsheets tracking the transfers, notes about which assets were in his name only versus jointly held. She found everything because David, in his arrogance, had not even tried very hard to hide it. Why would he? His wife was not interested in finances, did not understand business, would never think to look. She found emails to Vanessa, not love letters, nothing dramatic, but professional messages that carried an undertone of intimacy, references to dinner plans, to conversations they had, to inside jokes. An email where David mentioned he would be staying late at the office, sent to Vanessa at 6 in the evening on a night Claire remembered him coming home after 11 and saying he had been in meetings. She photographed it all. By the time she was done, she had over 200 photos on her phone. She closed the laptop, returned everything to exactly how she had found it, and went back to the bathroom. She actually got in the tub now, let the hot water ease the tension in her muscles. She felt oddly calm. The evidence existed. It was documented. She had what she needed. This became her routine. Over the next 6 weeks, Claire lived a double life. During the day, she was the dutiful wife, pleasant and undemanding. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, went to work, came home. She smiled at David's stories about his day. She agreed when he suggested weekend plans. She played her role perfectly. But in the stolen moments, she was someone else entirely. She went through files in the home office whenever David was out or distracted. She found more evidence, more transfers, more proof of systematic asset hiding. She discovered he had moved $85,000 out of their joint investments and into offshore accounts over the course of 10 months. She found notes about changing beneficiaries on his life insurance policy. She found a document outlining what he considered his separate assets versus marital assets, a list that conveniently categorized most of their wealth as his alone. She sent everything to Rachel, who was building a case file. Rachel also hired a forensic accountant who began tracing the money, creating a detailed picture of exactly what David had hidden and when. The accountant found something else, too: irregularities in David's expense reports to his company. He had been claiming personal expenses as business expenses, inflating costs, possibly embezzling funds. It was not a huge amount, maybe $15,000 or $20,000 over 2 years, but it was fraud, corporate fraud. This could destroy his career, Rachel told Claire during one of their meetings. If the company finds out, he will be fired, possibly prosecuted. Are you sure you do not want to use this? I am sure, Claire said. He will destroy his own career eventually. Men like him always do. I do not need to be the one who pulls the trigger. Rachel looked at her with something like admiration. You are stronger than you think you are. Claire was not sure about that. Some nights, after David fell asleep, she lay awake, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. 12 years of her life, invested in a marriage that had been hollow for most of it. 12 years of making herself smaller, of accepting less than she deserved, of believing that love meant constant compromise and self-erasure. The grief of it was enormous, but so was the anger, and the anger was useful. It kept her focused. It kept her moving forward. She continued her German studies too, though now it felt different. Before, learning German had been about reclaiming a lost part of herself, about filling empty hours with something that made her feel alive. Now, it was preparation. She practiced conversations about legal matters, financial terms, business negotiations. She was getting ready for whatever came next. 6 weeks after the dinner with Stefan, Rachel called Claire into her office. The divorce papers were ready. They sat in a manila folder on Rachel's desk, official and final. Once we file these, everything changes, Rachel said. He will be served within 24 hours. Are you ready? Claire thought about the question. Was she ready to blow up her life? To face the anger and accusations? To wade through the messy process of untangling 12 years? Was she ready to be alone? To start over at 35? To face an uncertain future? Yes, she said. I am ready. We will file Thursday afternoon. He will be served Friday morning at his office. I recommend you not be at the house when it happens. Stay with a friend or check into a hotel. Let him process the initial shock alone. Do not engage if he calls or texts. Everything goes through me now. Claire nodded. She had already packed a bag, already made arrangements to stay with a colleague from work who had a guest room. She had transferred money from their joint account into her personal account. Not all of it, just enough to live on for a few months. She had made copies of important documents, had changed passwords on her personal email and social media accounts, had prepared as thoroughly as she knew how. Thursday came. Claire went to work, sat through meetings, responded to emails. At 3 in the afternoon, Rachel texted her a single word: filed. Claire sat at her desk, staring at that word, feeling the enormity of what she had just set in motion. There was no going back now. She left work at her usual time, drove home, and walked into the house like it was any other day. David was not home yet, which was good. She did not think she could sit through another dinner pretending everything was fine. Not now. Not when the papers were filed, and everything was about to explode. She left a note on the kitchen counter. Short, neutral. Staying at a friend's house tonight. See you tomorrow. She did not say which friend. She picked up her already packed bag from where she had hidden it in the guest room closet, and she left. Friday morning, Claire sat in her colleague's guest room, staring at her phone. At 9:45, Rachel texted, "He has been served." Then, a minute later, "He is calling me." Not answering. Let him stew. Claire's phone started ringing at 10:15. David. She did not answer. It rang again at 10:30. Again at 11. Text messages started coming through. "What the hell is this?" And "Call me right now," and "We need to talk about this." She deleted them without responding. Rachel called at noon. "He showed up at my office. I had security escort him out. He is very angry. Do not engage with him, Claire. Let me handle everything." "Okay," Claire said, though her hands were shaking. Saturday morning, Rachel called again. "He wants to talk to you. He is asking for a meeting. Says he wants to work things out, that you are overreacting. Do you want to meet with him?" Claire thought about it. Part of her wanted to hide, to avoid confrontation, to let the lawyers handle everything from a safe distance. But another part of her needed to face him, needed to see his face when he realized she was not the person he thought she was. "I will meet with him," Claire said, "but only at the house, only with you present, and only to collect the rest of my things." They arranged it for Saturday afternoon. Rachel would come with Claire. A police officer would also be present, standard procedure for domestic situations where there was potential for conflict. Claire drove to the house at 2 o'clock, Rachel following in her own car, the officer meeting them there. David's car was already in the driveway. Claire's hands were cold as she unlocked the front door. David was in the living room, pacing. He looked terrible. His hair was uncombed, his eyes were red. He was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. He looked like he had not slept. When he saw Claire, he started toward her. "Claire, what the hell are you doing? Divorce? You want a divorce? Why did you not talk to me first?" Rachel stepped between them. "Mr. Brennan, I am Claire's attorney. Any communication needs to go through me. Claire is here to collect her belongings. That is all." "I am not talking to you. I am talking to my wife," David said, trying to move around Rachel. The police officer, a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense expression, moved forward. "Sir, step back, please." David stopped, looked at the officer, then back at Claire. "You brought the police? You brought the police to our house? Claire, what is happening? Talk to me." Claire looked at him, this man she had loved, had married, had built a life with. He looked genuinely confused, genuinely hurt. He had no idea. Even now, served with divorce papers, faced with the collapse of his marriage, he still did not understand what he had done wrong. He thought she was overreacting, being emotional, not thinking clearly. "I am going upstairs to pack," Claire said, her voice steady. "I will be gone in an hour." She walked past him, past Rachel, past the officer, and went upstairs. She could hear David downstairs, his voice rising as he argued with Rachel, demanding explanations, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. She tuned it out. She went to the bedroom and began packing her clothes, her books, her personal items. She was methodical about it, filling boxes and suitcases with the pieces of her life that belonged only to her. David appeared in the doorway. "Claire, please, just talk to me. We can fix this. Whatever is wrong, we can fix it." She did not stop packing. "There is nothing to fix. Is this about me working too much? I know I have been distracted with the partnership deal, but that is almost done. Things will calm down. I will be around more. This is not about you working too much." He. She folded a sweater, placed it in the suitcase. Then what? What did I do? Just tell me what I did wrong and I will fix it. Claire stopped. She turned to face him fully. This was the moment. She could tell him she knew about Vanessa, about the offshore accounts, about everything. She could throw it all in his face right now, but she did not, because that would give him time to prepare, to move more money, to hide more evidence. Better to let him think she was just being emotional, just having some kind of breakdown. Better to keep her cards hidden a little longer. "You did not do anything wrong, David," she said, and watched relief start to cross his face. Then she continued, "You have been exactly who you are. I am the one who changed. I am the one who finally realized I deserve better." The relief vanished. Better? Better than what? Better than this house? This life? Everything I have given you? Better than being invisible, Claire said quietly. Better than being dismissed and ignored and treated like I am not quite smart enough to matter. Better than being with someone who sees me as a supporting character in his life instead of a partner. "That is not fair," David said, and he actually sounded hurt. "I never treated you that way." "You did. You do. You just never noticed because I got very good at being quiet about it." She zipped the suitcase closed. "I need you to leave now so I can finish packing. Claire, please, we can go to counseling. We can work on this. I love you." She looked at him, and something in her expression must have communicated finality, because he stopped talking. "No, you do not," she said. "You love the idea of me. You love having a wife who does not challenge you, who makes your life comfortable, who fits into the picture of success you have built. But you do not love me. You do not even know me." Before he could respond, Rachel appeared behind him. "Mr. Brennan, you need to step away and let Claire finish. Now." David looked like he wanted to argue, but the police officer was there too, standing in the hallway with her hand resting casually on her belt. He backed away. Claire heard him go downstairs, heard him slam something, maybe a cabinet door, in frustration. She finished packing. It took 2 trips to carry everything to her car. David watched from the living room window, his face a mixture of anger and confusion, and something that might have been genuine grief. Claire did not let herself feel sympathy. She loaded the last box, closed her trunk, and walked back to the house one final time. David met her at the door. "Is this really it?" he asked, and his voice cracked slightly. Claire looked at him, at this man who had been her whole world for 12 years, who had slowly eroded her sense of self while being completely oblivious to the damage he was causing. She thought about telling him everything right now, thought about revealing that she spoke German, that she had heard every word at that dinner, that she knew about Vanessa and the offshore accounts and all of it, but she did not. She just said, "Yes, this is really it." Then she got in her car and drove away from the house, from the marriage, from the life she had outgrown. In her rearview mirror, she saw David standing in the driveway, watching her leave. She did not look back again. The next 8 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, paperwork, and the slow, painful process of untangling 2 lives that had been woven together for more than a decade. Claire stayed with her colleague for 2 weeks, then found a small 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood she had always liked, but David had dismissed as too far from his office. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an older building, with hardwood floors that creaked and windows that looked out over a tree-lined street. It was smaller than the house, quieter, and entirely hers. David fought the divorce at first. He hired an expensive attorney, a man with a reputation for aggressive tactics and winning. He contested the asset division, claimed that Claire was not entitled to half of everything because she had not contributed equally to their wealth. His attorney argued that David's income had been substantially higher throughout the marriage, that his career advancement had been the primary driver of their financial success, and that Claire's contributions to the household, while appreciated, did not warrant an equal split. Rachel countered with the offshore accounts. She presented the forensic accountant's findings, showed the systematic transfer of $85,000 into Swiss accounts, demonstrated the timeline of these transfers coinciding with David's promotion and the initial discussions about the partnership deal. She argued that David had engaged in financial fraud, had deliberately hidden marital assets with the intention of depriving Claire of her fair share in an anticipated divorce. David's attorney tried to claim the transfers were legitimate tax planning, standard asset protection strategies. But the accountant's testimony was damning. The transfers had been made to secret accounts. David had never disclosed them to Claire. The timing suggested premeditation. And when pressed during a deposition about why he had never mentioned these accounts to his wife, David had stumbled, had given contradictory answers, had ultimately undermined his own case. The discovery process was brutal. Both sides requested financial documents, employment records, communications. Claire had to turn over her bank statements, her tax returns, her employment history. David had to do the same. And that was when things got worse for him. The forensic accountant, while reviewing David's expense reports from his company, found the irregularities Rachel had mentioned months earlier. Inflated travel expenses, personal purchases categorized as business costs, restaurant bills for dinners with Vanessa claimed as client entertainment. It was not a massive amount, maybe $18,000 over 2 years, but it was clear, documented fraud. Rachel pulled Claire aside during a break in a particularly contentious mediation session. "We need to make a decision," she said quietly. "We can use the corporate fraud. We can threaten to report it to his company if he does not agree to our terms. It would give us enormous leverage." Claire sat in the sterile conference room, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and thought about it. David was fighting her on everything. He was contesting spousal support, arguing she did not need it because she had a job. He was trying to claim the house as his separate property because he had made the down payment. Never mind that she had paid half the mortgage for 5 years. He was being vindictive and petty and doing everything he could to punish her for leaving. Using the fraud would end the fight. He would settle immediately. She would get everything she was asking for and more. It was tempting. But Claire shook her head. "No, we do not use it. We win this on the merits of the case we already have. If his company finds out about the fraud, that is their business, not ours. I am not going to be the one to destroy his career, even if he deserves it." Rachel looked at her for a long moment. "You are a better person than most of my clients. I am not trying to be better. I just do not want to be tied to him through revenge. I want a clean break. I want to win because our case is strong, not because I blackmailed him into settling." So they continued, without the threat of exposing the corporate fraud. And slowly, as the evidence mounted, as the accountant's testimony proved irrefutable, David's position weakened. His attorney began pushing for settlement. David, faced with the reality that he was going to lose and lose badly, finally agreed to mediation. The mediation took place in Rachel's office on a gray morning in early April, 8 months after Claire had filed for divorce. David sat on one side of the conference table with his attorney, looking diminished somehow, smaller than Claire remembered. She sat across from him with Rachel, and they negotiated the terms of their separation like business partners dissolving a failed venture. Claire got half of all marital assets, including the funds David had hidden in offshore accounts. The house would be sold and the proceeds divided equally. She would receive spousal support for 4 years, a monthly amount that would allow her to rebuild her career and her life without immediate financial panic. David's retirement accounts would be split. The cars, the furniture, the accumulated possessions of 12 years would be divided with painful precision. David signed the agreement without looking at her. His attorney pushed the papers across the table and David scrawled his signature, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the wall behind Claire's head. She signed too, her hand steady, her signature clear and firm. It was done. Afterward, as they gathered their papers and prepared to leave, David finally looked at her. "I still do not understand what happened," he said, his voice low. Everything was fine. And then suddenly, it was not. What changed, Claire? She could have told him everything then. Could have revealed that she spoke German, that she had heard every word at that dinner with Stefan, that she knew about Vanessa, and the secret planning, and all his careful strategies to exit their marriage while keeping his wealth intact. She could have watched his face change as he realized how thoroughly he had underestimated her, but she did not. She just said, "I changed. I finally became someone who knows her own worth." She walked out of the conference room, out of the building, into the April sunshine. Rachel followed her out, and they stood on the sidewalk for a moment, not speaking. Then Rachel said, "How do you feel?" Claire considered the question. "Free," she said finally. "I feel free." The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later, processed through the court system with efficient bureaucratic indifference. Claire received a copy of the final decree in the mail, official stamps and signatures declaring that her marriage to David Michael Brennan was legally dissolved. She held the document for a long moment, then filed it away in a folder labeled Important Documents, and tried to figure out what came next. She threw herself into work. Her German skills, which she had continued to practice throughout the divorce proceedings, opened unexpected doors. A colleague at the consulting firm mentioned that they occasionally needed translators for international clients, and Claire offered her services. She translated marketing materials from German to English, then from English to German. She was good at it, better than good. She understood not just the words, but the cultural nuances, the way messages needed to be adapted to resonate with different audiences. After 3 months of freelance translation work on top of her regular job, Claire made a decision. She quit her position at the consulting firm and signed with a professional translation agency. The pay was better, the work more challenging, and she had the flexibility to build her own schedule. She worked from her small apartment, taking calls with clients in Berlin and Munich and Vienna, translating everything from legal contracts to technical manuals to creative advertising copy. It was not glamorous work, but it was hers. She had built this skill on her own, had created this opportunity through 700 hours of secret study and months of continued practice. Every project she completed felt like proof that she was capable of more than David had ever given her credit for. Every satisfied client was evidence that she could thrive independently. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, something happened that Claire had been grimly expecting. David was fired from his company. She heard about it through a mutual acquaintance who called to ask if she knew what had happened. The company had conducted a routine audit, the acquaintance explained, and found irregularities in David's expense reports. There had been an investigation. David had been dismissed for cause, forfeiting his severance package and his unvested stock options. Claire felt no satisfaction in the news. She had not reported the fraud. The company had discovered it on their own, exactly as she had predicted they would. Men like David, who believed the rules did not apply to them, who cut corners and assumed they were too clever to get caught, eventually self-destructed. He had not needed to be the instrument of his downfall. He had managed that himself. She heard through the same network of acquaintances that David had found another job 3 months later, but at a much lower level, with a salary that was 40% less than what he had been making. He had also ended his relationship with Vanessa, though whether that was his choice or hers, Claire did not know and did not care. Meanwhile, Claire was rebuilding. She was not just surviving, but slowly beginning to thrive. The translation work grew. She developed a reputation for reliability and quality, and clients began requesting her specifically. The agency offered her a contract position with benefits, which she accepted. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, she had more work than she could handle on her own. One evening in late September, almost a year after that fateful dinner with Stefan, Claire was working at her small kitchen table, translating a technical document about renewable energy systems, when her phone rang. It was the owner of the translation agency, a businesswoman named Patricia, who Claire had come to respect enormously. "Claire, I have something I want to run by you," Patricia said. "We have a big project coming up, a series of business meetings between one of our major clients here and a German manufacturing company. They need someone who can do simultaneous interpretation, someone who understands both American business culture and German corporate protocols. The meetings are in person, not remote. You interested?" "Absolutely," Claire said, her heart rate picking up. Simultaneous interpretation was more challenging than written translation, required faster processing and more confidence. But she had been practicing, had been working with Petra to improve her real-time speaking skills. "When are the meetings?" "Next week, Tuesday through Thursday. Downtown office complex. The pay is substantial. This is specialized work. But I will warn you, it is high pressure. You will be in a room with executives making million-dollar decisions, and every word you translate matters." "I can do it," Claire said. "I know you can. I will send you the details." The following Tuesday, Claire arrived at a modern office building in the financial district, dressed in a professional black suit, her red hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her portfolio containing her notes and preparation materials. She checked in at the reception desk, was given a visitor badge, and was directed to a conference room on the 14th floor. She walked into the conference room and stopped so abruptly that she almost dropped her portfolio. Sitting on the far side of the large table, reviewing documents with a colleague, was Stefan Müller. Their eyes met across the room. Claire watched recognition dawn on his face, watched his expression shift from professional neutrality to something more complex. Surprise, understanding, and unless she was very much mistaken, respect. Stefan stood and walked around the table to where Claire was standing. He extended his hand. "Claire," he said in English, his accent exactly as she remembered it. "It is good to see you again." She shook his hand, maintaining her composure even though her heart was pounding. "Mr. Müller, I did not realize you were the client for this project, nor did I realize you were the translator." Teeth. He paused, and something unspoken passed between them. He knew. Of course he knew. He had been there at that dinner, had heard David's careless revelations, had seen Claire sitting quietly with her pleasant, disinterested expression. And now here she was, a professional translator, clearly fluent in the language she had pretended not to understand. "Your German is excellent," he said quietly. "I look forward to working with you." "Thank you," Claire said. "I look forward to working with you as well." The meetings proceeded over 3 days. Claire translated with precision and confidence, moving seamlessly between English and German, facilitating communication between executives, negotiating a complex manufacturing partnership. She was good at this work. She understood the technical terminology, the business concepts, the subtle cultural differences in how Americans and Germans approached negotiations. The executives on both sides complimented her work, said she made the complex discussions flow naturally. Stefan was unfailingly professional during the meetings, but during breaks, he would sometimes catch her eye and nod with what looked like approval. On the final day, after the meetings concluded and contracts were signed and everyone was shaking hands and congratulating each other on a successful negotiation, Stefan approached her. "Claire, do you have a moment?" he asked. They stepped out into the hallway, away from the celebrating executives. Stefan looked at her directly. "I owe you an apology," he said in German. "You do not," Claire responded, also in German, falling naturally into the language. "I do. I was present at that dinner. I heard what David said. I should have said something, should have stopped him. Instead, I sat there and let him speak about you that way. It was wrong." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You looked uncomfortable. I saw that, but it was not your place to defend me. It was David's place to respect me, and he chose not to. That is not your fault. Still, I am sorry. For what it is worth, I ended my friendship with David after that night. The things he said, the way he spoke about his own wife, about his plans, It showed me who he really was, and I wanted no part of it. Thank you for telling me that, Claire said. She meant it. Stefan smiled slightly. Your German is remarkable. How long were you studying before that dinner? 6 months. 700 hours. His eyebrows rose. 700 hours in 6 months. That is dedication. It was, Claire agreed. I had good motivation. They stood there for another moment, and then Stefan said, I do not know what your plans are, but if you are ever interested in working in Germany, I know several companies that would value your skills. Translation, cultural consulting, business development. You have a rare combination of language ability and business understanding. Claire felt something shift in her chest, a door opening onto possibilities she had not considered. Thank you. I will keep that in mind. They exchanged business cards. Stefan returned to his colleagues. Claire packed up her materials and left the building, walking out into the September afternoon with her mind racing. Working in Germany. Actually living there, not as a 21-year-old study abroad student, but as a professional, as someone with skills and experience and value. The idea took root. Over the next months, as Claire continued her translation work, she began researching opportunities in Germany. She reached out to contacts, explored companies that needed people with her skill set. She was not running away from anything now. She was running toward something. In January, 10 months after the divorce was finalized, she received a job offer. A mid-sized consulting firm in Berlin was looking for a senior translator and cultural liaison for their American business division. The position would require her to move to Germany, would involve travel between Berlin and various American cities, would pay significantly more than she was currently making. It was everything she had not known she wanted. She accepted the position. She gave notice at the translation agency, though Patricia told her she would always have freelance work available if she wanted it. She sold most of her furniture, packed what remained of her belongings into a few suitcases and boxes, and prepared for the move. Before she left, she did one thing she had been putting off. She wrote a letter. Not to David, but to her younger self. The 21-year-old who had been so excited about studying abroad in Berlin, who had started learning German with such enthusiasm, who had given up that dream because a boy she had been dating for 2 months asked her to stay. The letter was simple. You should have gone, she wrote. You should have chosen yourself, but it is okay. You will get there eventually, just in a different way, at a different time. And maybe it will be better this way. Maybe you needed to learn some hard lessons first. Maybe you needed to lose yourself completely before you could find yourself again. You will make it to Berlin. It just takes longer than you planned, but you will make it. She did not mail the letter anywhere. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her journal. A reminder and a promise. 3 weeks later, Claire boarded a plane at San Francisco International Airport. She sat by the window and watched California disappear beneath clouds. 11 hours later, she landed in Berlin. It was early March, cold and gray, but the city felt alive in a way that made her heart race. She collected her luggage, cleared customs, took a taxi to the furnished apartment her new company had arranged for her first month. The apartment was in a neighborhood called Prenzlauer Berg, all tree-lined streets and old buildings and small cafes. Claire dropped her bags just inside the door and stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. She was here. After 16 years, after a failed marriage, after losing herself and finding herself again, she was here. She unpacked slowly, hanging clothes in the closet, arranging toiletries in the bathroom, setting up her laptop on the small desk by the window. Then she pulled on a warm coat and went outside to explore her new neighborhood. She walked for hours, down streets she had only seen in photographs, past landmarks she had studied in college, through parks where people walked dogs and children played, despite the cold. She stopped at a small cafe and ordered coffee in German, the words flowing easily, naturally. The barista responded without confusion or hesitation. just took her order and made her drink. And Claire felt an absurd surge of pride. She was doing this. She belonged here. That evening, exhausted from travel and emotion, and the overwhelming reality of what she had done, Claire sat in her new apartment and called Patricia to let her know she had arrived safely. Then she called Rachel. "I am in Berlin," she said, when Rachel answered. "How does it feel?" Rachel asked. Claire looked out her window at the German street below, at the life she was about to step into. "It feels right," she said. "It feels like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "You did this yourself," Rachel said. "You know that, right? You learned a language, ended a marriage, rebuilt your career, and moved to another country. All by yourself. You should be proud." "I am," Claire said, and realized it was true. "I really am." After they hung up, Claire sat in the quiet apartment and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had brought her here. The betrayal and the pain, the secret studying and the careful planning, the divorce proceedings and the slow rebuilding. The moment at that dinner when she had chosen to stay silent and listen, the decision that had changed everything. It had been the worst and the best night of her life, all at once. Worst because she had heard truths that shattered her world. Best because those truths had finally given her permission to stop making herself small, to stop accepting less than she deserved. She thought about David, wondered briefly where he was, what he was doing. Then she let the thought go. He was her past. This, Berlin, this new life, this was her present and her future. Claire opened her laptop and began preparing for her first day of work, reviewing files and familiarizing herself with her new company's clients and projects. She worked until her eyes grew heavy, then got ready for bed. As she was brushing her teeth, she caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. Red hair loose around her shoulders, blue eyes bright even through the exhaustion, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She looked different than she had a year ago. Stronger, more certain, more herself. Tomorrow, she would start her new job. Tomorrow, she would begin building a life in this city she had dreamed about for 16 years. Tomorrow, she would continue becoming whoever she was meant to be. But tonight, she was just going to sleep in her apartment in Berlin and let herself feel satisfied with how far she had come. Claire's first week at the consulting firm was a whirlwind of introductions, orientations, and information overload. Her official title was Senior Cultural Liaison and Translation Specialist, which sounded impressive, but essentially meant she facilitated communication between the firm's American and German divisions. She translated documents, interpreted meetings, advised on cultural differences in business practices, and helped navigate the subtle complexities of cross-cultural negotiations. Her colleagues were welcoming. Her boss, a sharp woman in her 50s named Heike, took Claire under her wing immediately, introducing her to key clients and explaining the firm's approach to international consulting. The work was challenging in the best possible way. Claire found herself translating complex legal agreements one day, interpreting technical engineering discussions the next, then advising on marketing strategies that would resonate with American audiences. She was using every skill she had developed, every hour of those 700 hours of study, every lesson learned from rebuilding her life. The language continued to challenge her in small ways. Native speakers used idioms she had not encountered, spoke quickly in regional dialects, made cultural references she had to research later. But she was learning constantly, improving daily. And more importantly, she was happy. She woke up each morning in her small apartment in Prenzlauer Berg and felt genuinely excited about the day ahead. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. 3 months into her new position, Heike called Claire into her office. "We have a major project coming up," she said, gesturing for Claire to sit. "A large American tech company is considering a partnership with one of our longtime German clients. The initial meetings will be here in Berlin next month. We need someone to handle all the translation and cultural coordination. It is a big opportunity, very high profile. I want you to lead it." Claire felt a surge of nervous excitement. What company? Heike named a major technology corporation, one of the giants in the industry. Claire knew it immediately. It was not David's company, but it was similar, the kind of place where ambitious executives fought for vice presidencies and built careers on successful international partnerships. For a brief moment, she thought about the irony. A year ago, she had been the wife who sat quietly at business dinners, dismissed as someone who did not understand the complexities of the corporate world. Now she was leading those very negotiations. "I can do it," Claire said. "I know you can," Heike replied, smiling. "You have been impressive, Claire. Your German is excellent, but more than that, you understand people. You read rooms well. That is a rare skill." The project consumed Claire's attention for the next month. She coordinated logistics, reviewed technical documents, prepared briefing materials, and conducted research on both companies involved. When the American executives arrived in Berlin, she was ready. The meetings took place over 4 days in a conference center near Potsdamer Platz. Claire translated, interpreted, facilitated discussions, and smoothed over cultural misunderstandings before they could become problems. The Americans were impressed by her fluency and her understanding of their business objectives. The Germans appreciated her respect for their communication style and decision-making processes. The negotiations went smoothly, and by the 4th day, both sides had agreed to move forward with a preliminary partnership. As the final meeting concluded and everyone was gathering their materials, the lead American executive, a woman named Jennifer who ran business development, approached Claire. "You were excellent this week," Jennifer said. "Truly. You made this whole process so much easier than it could have been. Where did you learn German? Did you study abroad?" Claire smiled slightly. "I taught myself, actually. Started about 2 years ago." Jennifer's eyebrows rose. "You taught yourself to this level in 2 years? That is remarkable." "I had good motivation," Claire said, the same words she had once told Stefan. After the meetings concluded, Claire walked back to her office through the Berlin streets. It was late May now, and the city was beautiful. Trees in full bloom, outdoor cafes filling with people enjoying the warm weather. She stopped at a small bakery she had discovered near her apartment and bought a pretzel, eating it as she walked, feeling utterly content with the simple moment. That evening, she video-called Rachel, who was eager to hear about the successful project. They had maintained regular contact since Claire moved to Berlin, their friendship renewed and strengthened by everything they had been through together. "You sound happy," Rachel observed. "Really happy. Not just okay, but genuinely happy." "I am," Claire said. "I love the work. I love the city. I love my life here. It is not perfect, but it is mine, you know? I built this." "You did," Rachel agreed, "and you should be incredibly proud of that." After they hung up, Claire sat by her window and watched the street below. A young couple walked past, holding hands and laughing. An elderly man walked his small dog. A woman around Claire's age sat alone at the cafe across the street, reading a book and drinking wine. Ordinary moments, ordinary lives, but there was beauty in the ordinariness. Claire had been on a few dates since moving to Berlin. Nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with men she met through work or friends. She was not looking for a relationship, was not trying to fill the space David had left. She was content being alone, learning who she was outside of marriage, outside of being defined by someone else's perception of her. Maybe someday she would want partnership again, but for now, she wanted independence. Summer arrived. Claire's company gave her 2 weeks of vacation, and she used it to travel. She took trains to Munich, to Vienna, to Prague. She visited museums and historic sites and small villages in the countryside. She ate local food, practiced her German with shopkeepers and hotel staff, filled a journal with observations and sketches and memories. She traveled alone, and instead of feeling lonely, she felt free. When she returned to Berlin, there was an email waiting from Stefan Müller. She had not heard from him since that day after the business meetings in San Francisco, though she had occasionally wondered how he was doing. The email was brief and professional. His company was expanding their American operations and needed someone to help establish their presence, someone who understood both German corporate culture and American business practices. Would Claire be interested in discussing a consulting opportunity? She responded that she would. They arranged a video call for the following week. When Stefan's face appeared on her screen, she was struck by how much more relaxed he seemed than he had at either of their previous meetings. They spoke in German, falling easily into the language. "Your company has been very successful in Europe," Claire said, after they had exchanged pleasantries. "What made you decide to expand more aggressively into the American market?" Stefan explained the business rationale, the market opportunities, the strategic vision. Then he said, "To be honest, part of it is personal. I want to build something new, something that reflects the values I care about: integrity, transparency, genuine partnership, and I want to work with people I respect." Claire understood what he was not quite saying. He wanted to build a company culture different from what he had witnessed with David, different from the casual dismissiveness and hidden agendas and strategic manipulations. They discussed the consulting opportunity. It would be a significant project, would require Claire to travel regularly to the United States to help establish operations there, would involve recruiting and training staff, developing protocols, building relationships with American clients. It would be challenging and demanding. It would also be exactly the kind of work Claire had been preparing herself for, without quite realizing it. "I am very interested," Claire said. "Let me discuss it with Heike. Make sure there are no conflicts with my current position. But yes, I am very interested." After the call ended, Claire sat back in her chair and allowed herself a moment of wonder. 2 years ago, she had been lying awake in her bedroom in California, feeling invisible and insignificant. Now she was being recruited for international consulting projects, traveling between countries, building a career that felt meaningful and substantial. The transformation was so complete, it sometimes felt surreal. She discussed the opportunity with Heike, who was enthusiastic. "This is exactly the kind of high-level project that will raise your profile," Heike said, "and it is not a conflict with your work here. If anything, it enhances your value to us. You should absolutely do it." Claire accepted the consulting position with Stefan's company. The work began in September and quickly became one of the most satisfying professional experiences of her life. Stefan was a completely different kind of leader than David had been. He listened to Claire's suggestions, valued her expertise, treated her as a genuine partner in the project. They worked together to establish the American division, and Claire found herself drawing on every experience she had ever had, every lesson she had learned, to help build something from the ground up. During one of her trips to the United States in October, Claire had a layover in San Francisco. She had a few hours between flights, and on impulse, she rented a car and drove to her old neighborhood. She parked across the street from the house she had shared with David and sat there for a long moment, looking at the place that had been her home for 5 years. It looked exactly the same. Same gray siding, same manicured lawn, same large windows that let in so much light. A different car sat in the driveway. New owners, she assumed. The house had sold quickly after the divorce was finalized, had been snapped up by a young family eager for the good school district and the proximity to tech company campuses. Claire did not feel sad looking at it. She did not feel angry or regretful or nostalgic. She felt nothing, really, except a mild curiosity about the people who lived there now, whether they were happy, whether the house felt full or empty to them. Then she drove away and did not look back. She returned to Berlin and threw herself back into her work. The consulting project with Stefan's company was going well. Her position at her own firm continued to grow in scope and responsibility. She was busy, fulfilled, constantly learning and growing. She had built a circle of friends in Berlin, a mixture of colleagues and people she had met through language exchange groups and social activities. She had a life that felt rich and textured, and entirely her own. December arrived, bringing cold weather and Christmas markets and the particular magic that Berlin seemed to hold during the winter holidays. Claire's company closed for 2 weeks over the holidays, and most of her colleagues traveled to visit family. Claire had no family obligations, no expectations to meet, nowhere she had to be. The freedom of it was intoxicating. On Christmas Eve, she bundled up in a warm coat and scarf and walked through the city. The Christmas markets were alive with lights and music, and the smell of mulled wine and roasted almonds. She wandered from stall to stall, buying small gifts for her colleagues, sipping hot chocolate, listening to carolers singing in German. The songs were familiar melodies with unfamiliar words, and she found herself humming along. As the evening grew darker and colder, Claire made her way to a small cafe she had discovered months earlier, a quiet place tucked away on a side street where they served excellent coffee and homemade pastries. She ordered a cappuccino and a slice of apple strudel and sat at a small table by the window. The cafe was nearly empty, just Claire and an elderly couple in the corner, and the young barista who had served her. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Snow had started to fall outside, light flakes drifting past the window. Claire watched the snow and thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about that dinner 2 years ago, sitting at an elegant restaurant table while her husband discussed his affair and his financial scheming in a language he believed she could not understand. She thought about the decision she had made in that moment to stay silent, to listen, to gather her strength before acting. It had been the right decision, though at the time it had felt like the hardest thing she had ever done. She thought about the nights spent crying in bathrooms while David slept, the careful documentation of evidence, the months of divorce proceedings. She thought about the fear and uncertainty, the moments when she had questioned whether she was doing the right thing, whether she was strong enough to rebuild alone. And she thought about everything that had come after. The translation work, the move to Berlin, the career she had built, the life she had created. She thought about walking through the city she had dreamed about at 21, not as a naive student, but as a competent professional who had earned her place here through hard work and determination. The barista approached her table. "Excuse me," she said in German. "We are closing soon. Can I get you anything else?" Claire looked at her watch. It was nearly midnight, Christmas Day. "No, thank you," she said, also in German. "Just the check, please." She paid and stepped out into the snowy night. The streets were quiet now, most people home with their families. Claire walked slowly back toward her apartment, in no hurry, enjoying the peace of the empty streets and the gentle snowfall. As she walked, she passed a small church where midnight mass was just ending. People streamed out, bundled in winter coats, calling out greetings to each other in German. Claire paused across the street, watching them. Families, couples, groups of friends, all part of a community she was still learning to join. She did not feel like an outsider watching them, though. She felt like someone who was slowly, steadily, building her own place in this city, in this life. She continued walking until she reached her apartment building. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, unlocked her door, and stepped into her small space. It was modest, certainly nothing like the house she had shared with David, but it was warm and comfortable and filled with things she had chosen. Books she was reading, photographs she had taken, a life that reflected who she actually was rather than who someone else wanted her to be. Claire made herself tea and sat at her small desk by the window. She pulled out her journal, the one where she had tucked the letter to her younger self, and opened to a fresh page. She dated it. December 24th. Then she began to write. "I made it to Berlin," she wrote. "It took 16 years longer than I planned, and the journey was nothing like what I imagined when I was 21. I thought I would come here as a student, eager and excited, and probably a little scared. Instead, I came here as a woman who had been broken down and had rebuilt herself from the foundation up. I came here having learned hard lessons about self-worth and partnership, and the danger of making yourself small to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be. She paused, looking out at the snowy street below, gathering her thoughts. That dinner, the one where I sat silent and listened to my husband plan my erasure, was the worst and best night of my life. She continued writing. Worst because I heard truths that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Best because those truths finally gave me permission to stop pretending, to stop making excuses, to stop accepting less than I deserved. She wrote about the 700 hours of German study, about the satisfaction of speaking this language she had taught herself, about the career she had built, and the independence she had claimed. She wrote about the freedom of being alone without being lonely, about learning to value her own company, about discovering that she was enough, all by herself, without needing someone else to validate her worth. Some dreams do not die, she wrote, echoing the thought she had carried with her through everything. They just wait. They wait until you are ready to pursue them the right way, as the right version of yourself. I was not ready for Berlin at 21. I thought I was, but I was not. I would have come here excited but uncertain, looking for external validation, probably making myself smaller to fit into someone else's expectations, just like I did with David. She set down her pen and read what she had written. Then she added one final paragraph. I came to Berlin at 37, as a woman who knows her worth, who has proven to herself that she is capable of extraordinary things, who does not need anyone's permission to take up space in the world. This version of me, the one who learned a language in secret and documented financial fraud and rebuilt a career from nothing, this version was worth waiting for. The dream did not die. It just waited until I was strong enough to deserve it. Claire closed her journal and set it aside. She finished her tea, washed the cup, and prepared for bed. As she was brushing her teeth, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rachel. Merry Christmas. Thinking of you today. Hope Berlin is everything you dreamed it would be. Claire smiled and typed back. It is better, because I am better. Merry Christmas, Rachel. Thank you for everything. She set her phone down and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror one last time. Red hair falling loose around her shoulders, blue eyes bright even in the dim light, a face that showed the evidence of hard-won strength and earned confidence. She looked like someone who had survived something difficult and had emerged stronger for it. She thought briefly about David, wondered if he was alone tonight, or with someone new, whether he had learned anything from the implosion of his career and his marriage, whether he ever understood what he had lost. Then she let the thought drift away. He was not her concern anymore. He was just a chapter in her story, an important one perhaps, but not the whole narrative. Claire's story was still being written. It was being written in German now, in a city she had dreamed about for 16 years, in a life she had built entirely on her own terms, and the best part, the part that filled her with quiet joy as she turned off the lights and climbed into bed, was that she was the only author. No one else was writing her story anymore. No one else was making her smaller, or dimming her light, or telling her she was not capable of real work, real thought, real achievement. She had taught herself a language. She had ended a marriage that was slowly killing her spirit. She had gathered evidence with the patience of someone who understood the value of strategy. She had rebuilt a career from nothing. She had moved to another country and started completely over. She had done all of that. And if she could do all of that, she could do anything. Claire fell asleep in her small apartment in Berlin, snow falling softly outside her window, and dreamed of all the possibilities that lay ahead. Not the dreams of a 21-year-old girl who had not yet learned how strong she could be, but the dreams of a woman who had been tested and had proven to herself that she was unbreakable. some dreams do not die. They just wait. And when you are finally ready, when you have become the person strong enough to claim them, they are there waiting for you, more beautiful than you ever imagined, because you earned them. You earned every single moment of them. Claire had earned this. Every cold morning walking through Berlin streets, every successful translation project, every moment of independence and self-sufficiency and hard-won peace. She had earned all of it, and it was only the beginning. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.